I still remember the exact date, September 12th, 2021. It was one of those Sundays where the air just feels heavier than usual, like the world knows something's about to change before you do. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window of our little townhouse in Portland, Oregon, and for a moment, everything felt normal. The faint smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, and I heard Emma's soft humming, something she always did when she was cooking breakfast. Back then, I thought I had everything. I was 32 years old, married to the woman I believed was the love of my life, working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt safe, predictable, grounded. We'd been married for 7 years, together for almost 10. Our wedding was in June 2014, a small ceremony in her parents' backyard in Eugene, with fairy lights strung through the trees and an acoustic guitarist playing Ed Sheeran's Thinking Out Loud. God, I used to replay that memory when things got hard between us. The way she looked at me that day, her soft brown curls falling across her face, that nervous laugh when she said I do. Back then, I thought nothing could ever break us. But maybe that was my first mistake, believing love was invincible. That morning, I walked into the kitchen and found her standing by the stove, wearing one of my old hoodies, barefoot, flipping pancakes like she always did on weekends. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something about that smile, it didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed little things like that back then, her hesitations, the distant stares, the way she'd drift off into thought when she thought I wasn't looking. But I brushed it off. I told myself it was work stress, exhaustion, maybe just the pandemic burnout that had been eating everyone alive. 2021 wasn't an easy year for anyone, right? People were still recovering from layoffs, lockdowns, anxiety. We'd both been through so much, it made sense if she was carrying more than she let on. At least, that's what I told myself. The cracks I ignored. Looking back, the signs were there. It started around March 2021, right after she got promoted at her job. Emma worked as a marketing strategist at a startup downtown, and she'd been pushing herself hard to climb the ladder. She got the promotion she'd been chasing for months, and I was so proud of her. I remember surprising her with dinner at Andina, one of her favorite Peruvian spots. She smiled that night, a real smile, and I thought we were okay. But after that, something shifted. She started staying late at work. At first it was once or twice a week, then 3 times, then 4. Big campaign deadlines, she said, and I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her. I'd sit at home eating dinner alone, scrolling through Netflix while she texted me she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd come home exhausted and collapse on the couch without even changing out of her work clothes. I'd sit beside her, rub her shoulders, and she'd mumble thanks without really looking at me. I told myself relationships have phases. We'd been together nearly a decade. It was normal for passion to ebb and flow, but deep down, something didn't feel right. That conversation. One night in late July, I asked her if everything was okay. We were sitting on the balcony, watching the last bits of sunlight bleed into the horizon. The smell of rain mixed with the faint aroma of her vanilla candle, and I remember gripping my beer bottle so tightly it left a dent in my palm. She hesitated before answering, staring down at the street below. I don't know, Alex. I just feel different lately. That word hung in the air like smoke I couldn't breathe through. I wanted to ask more, but she looked so fragile, like she was huddling herself together with threads, so I didn't push. I thought giving her space was the loving thing to do. I thought she'd come back to me when she was ready. I didn't know back then that silence can be a slow kind of death for a marriage. September 12th, 2021, the moment I'll never forget. After breakfast that rainy morning, we decided to go grocery shopping together. It sounds mundane, but little moments like that used to feel sacred to me, walking through aisles, debating which brand of cereal to get, laughing when she'd sneak extra chocolate into the cart. But that day felt off. She kept checking her phone, thumb tapping rapidly, screen lighting up again and again. Every time I glanced over, she'd tilt it away, sliding it back into her pocket. I told myself I was imagining things. That was my defense mechanism back then, denial dressed up as optimism. When we got home, I unloaded the bags while she went upstairs to shower. After 10 minutes, I realized she'd left her phone on the counter, and that's when I heard it. The sound that would change everything, a soft vibration. Then, another. Then another. I glanced at the screen. 5 new messages from someone saved as Matt. Work. I froze. My chest tightened. My pulse hammering so loud I could barely hear the rain anymore. I shouldn't look. I told myself. I shouldn't invade her privacy. But then another message popped up on the lock screen. And it was impossible to unsee. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I felt the air leave my lungs. My knees almost buckled. My stomach twisted. Bile rising to my throat. But my hands moved before my brain could stop them. I unlocked her phone. I'd known the passcode for years. And opened the thread. And that's when I saw them. Dozens of texts. Weeks worth of conversations. Photos. Plans. Late night confession. And right there in black and white were the words that would replay in my head for months. I can't believe I waited this long to admit it. I'm not in love with Alex anymore. I'm falling for you. The sound of my heart breaking. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screen, my vision blurring as tears welled up. My body felt disconnected, like I was floating above myself, watching someone else's life fall apart. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the realization that the person I'd built my life around wasn't who I thought she was anymore. I remembered the first time we met, 2011, a coffee shop near Reed College, both of us broke and chasing big dreams. She had this wild, untamed laugh that turned heads, and she used to scribble little quotes on napkins, saying she wanted to collect moments, not things. Back then, we were unstoppable. We traveled together, backpacking through Italy in 2015, road tripping the California coast in 2017, spending nights under the stars, talking about forever. And now, forever was gone. The irony was, just a week earlier, we'd been talking about maybe starting a family next year. I'd been looking at new apartments, places with a little backyard where we could have barbecues, and someday watch our kids run around. I thought we were building something. I thought she wanted the same future I did. But while I was planning forever, she was planning something else. What she said that night, when she came downstairs after her shower, I couldn't even look at her the same way. I asked her about the texts, my voice shaking, my hands cold and clammy. At first she denied it. She said I misunderstood, that it wasn't what it looked like. But when I showed her the messages, something in her just deflated. And then she said it, the words that shattered me more than the texts ever could. I'm sorry, Alex, but I'm not in love with you anymore. That was it. 7 years. A decade together. And she said it like she was announcing the weather. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of her. I just stood there, numb, while the sound of rain hit the windows like a steady drumbeat. That night, I slept on the couch. Or maybe I didn't sleep at all. I stared at the ceiling, my chest aching, my mind looping through memories, replaying every laugh, every kiss, every promise we ever made, all tangled up with the image of Matt's name lighting up her phone. And somewhere, deep down, a part of me knew, this was only the beginning. I woke up the next morning on the couch. Though I'm not sure I actually slept, my body felt like it had been hit by a truck, and my chest carried this dull, relentless ache, the kind that made breathing feel like effort. The sunlight slipping through the blinds felt too bright for how dark everything inside me felt. For a few seconds, I forgot what had happened the night before, that split second of peace when your brain hasn't caught up yet. But then I heard her footsteps upstairs, and it all came rushing back like a tidal wave. I remembered the texts, Matt, her words, I'm not in love with you anymore. And suddenly, the weight of it all slammed into me again. The confrontation that changed everything. I sat there on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, gripping a cold cup of coffee I'd made but couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands were trembling, my stomach twisted, and I couldn't stop running through a million what. When she finally came downstairs, her hair still damp from the shower, wearing the oversized sweatshirt she always stole from me, she looked tired, but not like me. Her exhaustion looked different, almost peaceful, like she'd already accepted something I was still desperately fighting against. I asked her if we could talk. She nodded, sitting across from me on the edge of the couch, her knees pulled close, fingers nervously tracing the seam of her jeans. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. My voice came out small, almost foreign to me as I asked her to tell me the truth, the whole truth this time. And she did. Her voice cracked as she admitted she'd been seeing Matt for 3 months. 3 months of late nights at the office, urgent deadlines, and secret rendezvous. She said it started innocently, long conversations about work, venting about stress, bonding over shared frustrations. She swore she didn't mean for it to happen, that she didn't plan to fall for him. But somehow those words didn't make it better. If anything, they made it worse. because if she didn't plan it, then it meant it just happened. Like love was a river, she simply floated down, leaving me behind on the shore. I don't know who I am anymore. I asked her why, over and over. Why him? Why now? Why destroy everything we built together? She cried, pressing her palms to her face, saying things like she felt lost, that she needed to figure out who she really was. She said being with Matt made her feel alive again, like she wasn't just someone's wife, like she wasn't trapped in the same routines we'd had for years. I sat there listening, my heart cracking in slow motion, realizing she wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving us, our history, our memories, our plans. I kept thinking about our honeymoon in Maui back in 2014, when we got sunburned after snorkeling, and spent an entire afternoon drinking cheap Mai Tais on the beach, laughing so hard we cried. Or that one Christmas in 2018 when we couldn't afford fancy gifts, so she made me a handwritten book of 100 Reasons I Love You. I still had that book in my nightstand. I couldn't even look at it now. The loneliest silence. After our conversation, the house went quiet, too quiet. I didn't know what to say, and apparently, neither did she. She spent most of that day upstairs in the bedroom while I sat downstairs, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, opening and closing apps without even seeing the screen. The smell of last night's coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the faint scent of her perfume from the laundry pile I hadn't touched. I texted my best friend Ethan, but then deleted the message before sending it. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. Saying it out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for real yet. The only sound in the house was the occasional vibration of her phone upstairs. I knew who it was. I didn't need to check. The night it all fell apart. That evening around 7 p.m., she came downstairs. I could tell she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she clutched her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She sat across from me at the dining table, avoiding my gaze. I stared at the wood grain on the table, my nails digging into my palms just to ground myself. Then she said it again, softer this time, like maybe if she whispered it, it would hurt less. I'm not in love with you anymore, Alex. She said she didn't want to hurt me but couldn't keep living a lie. She said she needed space to figure herself out, that she'd been thinking about moving out for a while now but didn't know how to tell me. That was the moment it truly hit me. Not when I read the text, not even when she admitted the affair, but right then when she said she'd been preparing to leave me while I was still dreaming of our future together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, break her phone, but I didn't. I just sat there, silent, letting her words burn holes in me. The night I drove, after she went upstairs, I grabbed my keys and left without a word. I drove aimlessly through the city, the rain blurring my windshield, the streets glowing under flickering streetlights. I ended up parked outside Keller Fountain Park, the place we used to visit when we first started dating. We'd sit on the stone steps watching the water cascade down, eating cheap takeout from a little sushi place nearby. I sat there for hours, staring at the fountain, replaying every moment of our relationship like an old film reel I couldn't turn off. I thought about the first time she told me she loved me, February 2012, Valentine's Day, sitting in her crappy studio apartment, drinking $8 wine from mugs because we didn't own wine glasses. And now, nearly a decade later, I was here, drowning in silence, wondering how love can turn into. When the numbness wore off, the next morning, the numbness gave way to something darker, anger. It wasn't explosive, not yet, but it simmered, slow and corrosive. I woke up to the sound of her laughing upstairs, soft but unmistakable, and I knew without looking that she was on the phone with him. I wanted to storm up there, grab the phone, scream at her, scream at him, but I didn't. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to hold myself together. I went for a run instead, something I hadn't done in months. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like concrete, but it didn't help. Nothing could outrun the image of her smiling into her phone, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The breaking point. That night, I told her she had to make a choice, me or him. I said I couldn't live in limbo, couldn't keep pretending we were okay while she built a life with someone else behind my back. She stared at me for a long time, tears streaming silently down her face, and then she said something that nearly broke me completely. I don't want to choose, because if I'm honest, I think I've already made my decision. It was like the floor gave out beneath me. I couldn't breathe. That's when I walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up sitting in my car in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands went numb. I thought about calling Ethan, my brother, anyone, but I couldn't find the word. How do you explain that the person you loved most has already left you, even if they're still living in your house?
losing her before she was gone. Over the next few days, we became strangers, living under the same roof. We barely spoke. When we did, it was clipped, polite, distant. She stayed upstairs. I stayed downstairs. The silence between us grew so loud it felt suffocating. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. My boss noticed sending me home one afternoon after I blanked during a meeting. I lied and said I had a migraine, but the truth was worse. I was unraveling. I found myself scrolling through her Instagram late at night, looking at old photos of us, reading captions where she called me the love of her life, and all I could think was, when did I stop being enough? By the end of that week, she told me she was moving out. She'd already found a small apartment downtown. She'd already made plans. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching her pack her favorite mugs into a box, feeling like my entire life was being dismantled piece by piece. And yet somewhere inside, a tiny ember of defiance sparked. I didn't know it then, but that ember would eventually grow into something much bigger, something that would change everything, because as much as she thought she'd broken me, she had no idea what was coming next. I thought watching her pack would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was the silence that followed. The moment the door clicked shut behind her on September 24, 2021, and her footsteps faded down the hallway, something inside me caved in. It wasn't just the absence of her, it was the absence of us. The house felt hollow, stripped of its heartbeat, the soft hum of her playlists, the scent of her vanilla lotion, the little notes she used to leave on the fridge, all gone. It was as if she'd taken not just her belongings, but every trace of who we used to be. I sat on the living room floor for hours that day, surrounded by cardboard boxes she didn't take. A half-empty mug of coffee sat beside me, cold and untouched. It was almost like time stopped moving, but my thoughts didn't. They just spiraled, faster and darker. The first night alone, that night, the silence was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, felt amplified. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bed. Her side still smelled like her shampoo and I wasn't ready to face that yet. So I slept on the couch, hugging one of the old throw pillows, trying to convince myself I wasn't falling apart, but I was. Around 2 a.m., I scrolled back through her texts again, the ones I'd already memorized, but couldn't stop reading, as if somehow I'd find a line I missed that would make it all make sense, but all it did was twist the knife deeper. I thought about calling her, begging her to reconsider, telling her I'd forgive her, that we could fix this, rebuild, but I didn't. Some tiny fragment of pride kept me silent, even though the rest of me wanted nothing more than to hear her voice. Instead, I opened Instagram, and found myself staring at her latest story, a boomerang of 2 wine glasses clinking together. One of them wasn't mine. I threw my phone across the room. It didn't break. I kind of wished it had. Losing myself, the days after she left blurred into one another. I stopped eating real meals, surviving on coffee and whatever I could microwave in under 2 minutes. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake until sunrise, then crash for an hour or two before dragging myself into the office. Work became hell. My coworkers noticed the change, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I stared blankly at my screen during meetings, forgetting what I was supposed to be doing. My boss, Rachel, pulled me aside one afternoon, gently asking if everything was okay. I lied and said I was just tired, but the truth was, I wasn't just tired, I was empty. I stopped hanging out with friends. I stopped answering texts, even when Ethan, my best friend since high school, showed up at my door with beer and takeout. I couldn't bring myself to let him in. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. And Emma had taken those with her. The spiral. By October, the sadness turned into something heavier. I'd wake up and feel this crushing weight on my chest, like my own body didn't want me to move. Some mornings, I'd sit on the edge of the bed for 20 minutes, staring at the floor, debating if there was even a point in getting up. I started drinking more. At first it was just a couple of beers at night to help me sleep, but soon it was whiskey, straight from the bottle, burning down my throat as if I could scorch the memories out of me. One night, Ethan came over unannounced and found me sitting on the kitchen floor with an open bottle, staring at nothing. He didn't say much, just sat down next to me and stayed there. That's the thing about real friends. They know when words won't help, but even then, I couldn't talk about it. Not fully, because saying it out loud, my wife left me for another man, felt like admitting I'd flashbacks that wouldn't let go. It's strange how heartbreak works. Your brain becomes this cruel film projector, looping old memories on repeat, whether you want them or not. I'd be driving to work and suddenly remember December 2016, the night we decorated our first Christmas tree together in this very house. Emma insisted we buy these ridiculous oversized ornaments shaped like reindeer. We'd spent hours laughing, tangled in lights, sipping hot cocoa while Sinatra played softly in the background, or I'd walk past the park where we used to run together on Saturdays, and suddenly hear her voice in my head, teasing me for being the slow one. Those little moments, the ones you never thought would matter, became daggers, because each one reminded me of what I'd lost, but also of how much she'd stopped caring long before I realized it. The first time I saw them together, I thought I'd been through the worst already. I was wrong. Again. It was October 16th, about 3 weeks after she moved out. Ethan convinced me to grab lunch downtown, saying I needed to get out of the damn house. I finally agreed, mostly because I was tired of staring at the same four walls. We were walking past Pine Street Market, when I saw her, Emma. She was sitting outside at one of the patio tables, laughing at something, and sitting across from her, leaning forward with his hand, brushing hers, was Matt. I froze, my feet felt glued to the pavement. She looked happy, radiant, even, the kind of happiness I hadn't seen from her in months, maybe years. Ethan started to say something, but I couldn't hear him. The sounds of the street, car horns, chatter, music from a nearby busker, all went muffled, like I was underwater. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I turned around and walked away, fast. I didn't look back. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway for almost an hour before going inside. I don't even remember the drive home. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles ached. I thought I'd hit rock bottom before, but that day, I learned rock bottom has layers. The therapist. 2 days later, Ethan sat me down and told me, point blank, that I needed help. He gave me the number of his therapist, Dr. Melissa Carter, and practically begged me to call. I resisted at first. Therapy wasn't something people in my family ever talked about, but after one particularly bad night, where I sat staring at my ceiling until sunrise wondering if life would ever feel normal again, I finally gave in. Dr. Carter didn't fix me overnight, but sitting in her office, soft lighting, muted tones, tissues always within reach, became a lifeline. She told me something during our second session that stuck with me. You're grieving a living person, that's why it feels impossible to move on, because they're still out there, living, breathing, choosing someone else, and your heart hasn't caught up yet. That broke me in a way I didn't expect, but it also made something click. The first step forward. By late November, I wasn't healed, not even close, but I'd stopped drowning quite as much. I started forcing myself to leave the house, even if it was just for a walk around the block. I signed up for a pottery class at Mimosa Studios, something Emma and I always talked about doing but never got around to. I went alone. It felt strange, sitting in a room full of strangers, my hands clumsy and shaky as I tried to mold clay into something resembling a bowl. But for the first time in months, I felt something, even if it was small. Ethan noticed the change too. One night, we sat on his porch drinking beers, and he said, "You're starting to look like yourself again." I wanted to believe him, but then came the blow that changed everything. Just when I thought I was crawling my way out of the hole, I got blindsided again. On December 5, 2021, I got a call from an unknown number. It was one of Emma's co-workers, someone I barely knew but had met at a holiday party once. Her voice was hesitant, shaky. She said she thought I deserved to know something, that Emma and Matt had been planning to move in together, and they'd been talking about getting engaged. I didn't even know how to process it. I thought I'd already mourned the death of my marriage, but that news, it tore open wounds I thought were finally starting to close. That night, I sat in my car outside Ethan's house, staring at my phone, debating whether to call her. I didn't. Instead, I stayed there in silence, feeling that old anger spark again, stronger this time. And for the first time since she left, I stopped crying. Not because I was okay, but because something inside me was shifting. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment the story started to turn.
I wish I could tell you, but after that night in the parking lot, after my breakdown in the car, things got easier. But I woke up the next day, took a deep breath, and magically found the strength to move on. But the truth, the weeks that followed, were some of the darkest days of my life. It was the middle of September 2021, when everything truly started unraveling. Summer was fading, and with it, so was any illusion that I could go back to who we used to be. The leaves in Central Park were starting to shift into those deep oranges and fiery reds, but I barely noticed. I'd walk past coffee shops I used to love, hear snippets of conversations and laughter, and feel like I was living in a parallel universe. Everyone else seemed fine, while I was stuck in a loop of betrayal, heartbreak, and unanswered questions. But somewhere deep inside me, a fire started to build. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't some heroic surge of energy. It was small, quiet, like a whisper at first. But every time I remembered her words, "I'm not in love anymore," and then thought about those texts to Mark, that whisper got louder. I couldn't live like this forever. I couldn't keep drowning while she got to walk away, pretending she was the victim of falling out of love. One night, around 2 a.m., I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by empty takeout containers, cold coffee mugs, and my laptop open to a blank Google Doc. My hands were shaking as I started typing. But once I began, I didn't stop. I wrote down every memory, every inconsistency, every lie she'd told me over the last year. It wasn't about revenge yet. At least that's what I told myself. It was about clarity, about taking all the chaos in my head and putting it somewhere I could see it. And that's when I noticed the timeline didn't add up. She'd told me she and Mark started talking just a few months ago. But the receipts told a different story. The texts went back 9 months. 9 months of late-night chats, inside jokes, shared playlists, and sneaky plans to accidentally bump into each other when I was busy. That was the breaking point for me. I realized this wasn't just a moment of weakness for her. It wasn't a random spark she couldn't control. This was planned, calculated. She had built a secret life right under my nose, and she had the audacity to tell me she fell out of love with me, like it just happened. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The numbness was gone, replaced by something sharp and cold. I wasn't going to be her quiet casualty. I started making small, deliberate moves. I didn't confront her yet. I didn't block her. I didn't scream, cry, or send paragraphs of rage at 3 a.m. like part of me wanted to. Instead, I went silent. And in that silence, I started rebuilding myself. First, I hit the gym again. It sounds cliché, I know, but there was something about sweating through the pain, about pushing my body past its limits, that helped clear my mind. I stopped drinking as much, started eating better, and forced myself back into a routine. My friends noticed the shift immediately. The same friends I'd pushed away while drowning in heartbreak. They pulled me back in whether I wanted it or not. Then I got strategic. I opened a private folder on my laptop and began saving screenshots, texts, emails, call logs, anything that painted the full picture of what had really happened. I didn't know if I'd ever use them, but having them gave me back a sense of control. Around late October, I finally decided to meet her face to face. I didn't tell her why, just asked if we could grab coffee to talk. We met at a small cafe in Brooklyn, and when she walked in, it felt surreal. For a moment, I saw the girl I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The same soft laugh, the same messy bun she always wore when she didn't want to try too hard. But then I remembered the texts, and suddenly I didn't see the woman I loved anymore. I saw a stranger. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't even accuse her outright. I just let her talk, and she did. She rambled about how confused she'd been, how she never meant to hurt me, how Mark was just a friend who understood her better than I did. She said all the predictable lines I'd read 100 times on heartbreak forums and Reddit threads. And then when she paused to sip her latte, I slid my phone across the table and showed her a single screenshot. One message, one date, one proof. The color drained from her face. She stammered, tried to explain, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I told her I knew everything, that I wasn't stupid, that she had taken the one thing we had, trust, and buried it. And then I stood up, left my untouched coffee on the table and walked out. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Not happy, not healed, but lighter. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I reconnected with old friends, spent time with my brother and his kids, and even started traveling again, short weekend trips. Nothing extravagant, but enough to remind myself what freedom felt like. I visited Boston, Chicago, and even went hiking upstate just to breathe air that didn't taste like heartbreak. But here's the twist. By December, I found out she and Mark had moved in together, and you'd think that would destroy me all over again. But instead I laughed, a bitter, hollow kind of laugh. Because here's the thing. Mark had a reputation. My friends had warned me about him years ago. A guy who never stayed loyal to anyone for long. A guy who craved the chase but lost interest the second he won. I didn't have to plan revenge. I didn't have to expose her or ruin her life. Life was going to do that for me. And deep down I knew it. I just had to wait. And sure enough, my patience would pay off in ways I never expected. The new year was coming. And with it something I never saw coming. The moment karma finally showed up at her door. By the time January 2022 rolled around, something inside me had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't over her. Not yet. But I wasn't drowning anymore. I had learned how to breathe again. Slowly, steadily, I'd pieced myself back together. Not perfectly, but enough to function. Enough to get out of bed without feeling like the walls were collapsing around me. I spent New Year's Eve at my friend Lucas's apartment in Queens. He'd thrown one of his classic rooftop parties, complete with cheap champagne, terrible 80s playlists, and string lights that looked like they might fall down any second. I hadn't planned on staying past midnight, but when the countdown started and everyone shouted Happy New Year under a sky lit up with fireworks, something unexpected washed over me. Hope. It was quiet, fragile, and almost terrifying, but it was there. I made myself one promise that night. 2022 would not be the year I lived in her shadow anymore. No more obsessing over what went wrong. No more scrolling through old texts or checking her socials at 2 a.m. No more waiting for closure from someone who had already moved on. And for a while I kept that promise. I focused on my work again, picked up new projects, and even started freelancing on the side. I hit the gym consistently, rebuilt my friendships, and spent my weekends exploring parts of the city I'd neglected for years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was finally moving forward. And then, karma showed up. It was late February when my phone buzzed with a message from an old mutual friend, Jenna. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but her text was short and to the point. Hey, did you hear about Emily and Mark? My heart skipped a beat, and for a second I debated not replying. I didn't want to care anymore, but curiosity won. I typed back, no, what happened? The 3 dots blinked for a long time before her response came through. Mark cheated. She found out last week, he's moving out. I froze. For a moment I just stared at the screen, my mind blank. I didn't know what to feel. Satisfaction, anger, sadness, vindication. It was all tangled together into this strange, overwhelming rush of emotions. Jenna went on to tell me that Mark had been seeing someone from his gym for months. Emily had found out when she saw messages pop up on his Apple Watch while he was in the shower. Apparently there'd been a huge fight. The kind that shakes the walls. He packed his things and left within 2 days. And just like that, the happy little life she'd built on my broken trust, shattered. I thought that would make me feel triumphant, like the universe had finally balanced the scales. But when I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Karma had handled that part for me. But closure wasn't about her. Closure had to come from me. Over the next few weeks I kept hearing bits and pieces about her life from mutual friends. She stopped showing up to events, deleted half her Instagram posts, and eventually moved back in with her parents for a while. Mark, on the other hand, was already flaunting his new relationship online like nothing had happened. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger when I thought about her. I didn't feel heartbreak, either. I just felt free. By spring, I decided it was time to do something I'd been putting off. I deleted every photo, every message, every reminder of her from my phone and laptop, not out of bitterness, but out of acceptance. Holding on to those digital ghosts wasn't going to bring me peace. And then, something unexpected happened. In early May, I met someone. Her name was Claire. We bumped into each other literally at a small bookstore in Soho. I was reaching for a copy of The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and so was she. Our hands touched, we laughed awkwardly, and somehow ended up talking for an hour in the middle of the aisle. She was funny, sharp, and effortlessly kind, the kind of person who made you feel lighter just by being around her. But this time, I didn't rush it. I didn't throw myself headfirst into something new to fill a void. We started slow. Coffee dates, long walks, casual conversations about books and music and bad movies. I told her about my past, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the long messy road to healing, and she didn't flinch. She just listened. By the end of the summer, I realized something profound. I wasn't the same person I had been a year ago. Back then, I thought love was about holding on no matter what, about sacrificing your peace,
just to keep someone happy. Now I understood that real love, the kind that lasts, can't survive without trust, respect and honesty. Emily had taught me that, painfully, brutally, but she taught me. I never reached out to her again. I didn't need to. The last time I saw her was by chance, in October, at a coffee shop on the Lower East Side. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow, like the weight of the last year had settled deep into her bones. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time I didn't feel anger or sadness or longing. I just felt nothing. I nodded politely. She gave me a faint, almost embarrassed smile and we went our separate ways. That was the moment I knew I'd finally healed. It's been over a year now since the night I found those texts. If you had told me back then that I'd come out of it stronger, calmer and happier than I'd ever been, I would have laughed in your face. But heartbreak has a strange way of rebuilding you if you let it. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes the closure you're searching for doesn't come from someone else apologizing, or karma striking, or getting even. Sometimes closure is simply waking up one day, taking a deep breath, and realizing the pain doesn't control you anymore. I thought losing her had shattered me, but looking back now, I realize she didn't break me, she freed me. And honestly, that's the happiest ending I could have asked for.